Hey, Elizabeth. I don't know. My name was different when I joined too. I had to rename myself.
Oh, am I also named you?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll fix that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and folks are trickling in. Thank you so much for joining. We'll get started shortly.
Hi, I realized I had not sent the final slides. My goodness. I'm so sorry. I sent them to Alyssa. Is she on?
She is about to be. She just let me know that she is in the elevator on the way to her office.
Okay.
Yeah. And thanks again for being patient, everyone. We'll get started shortly.
Great.
Sorry, it's using my headset. I need to disconnect my headset. Ariane, did you send a revised slide deck? I didn't have one in my email.
I did.
Why?
And just so you know, Alyssa, we're live.
Okay. I don't have, okay, I'll chat, I guess.
And Alyssa, I know everybody joined as my name for some reason, so you're gonna have to change. Actually, I can rename you while you look for it.
Hey y'all.
Hey, Tori.
Hi, Tori, and we are live. I just want to give you a heads up.
Thank you for everything you did to set this up, Gabby. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. We have about 100 participants on. Thanks for joining, everyone. We're just pulling up the final slide deck, so sorry for the delay. on that.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know, I'm Alyssa Chatterjee, and I am the Early Learning System Director of the Early Learning Division, soon to be the Department of Early Learning and Care. So we're really excited to have some time with you all this afternoon. We're going to give a couple of quick updates in terms of what to expect now that we're about 2 weeks away from the new department launch, and then want to make sure we give plenty of time for folks to ask questions. We're going to use the Q&A feature. It's those two kind of chat bubbles at the bottom of your screen. We'll go through these materials quickly. Gabby will be on hand to help kind of group together the questions you all are asking, and then we're aiming to have at least 30 minutes at the end of this to answer all of your questions. So thank you all for being here. We can go to the next slide. So hopefully you all are aware that we are becoming the Department of Early Learning and Care on July 1st, recognizing that there is a holiday right in there. We've really been thinking about July 5th as sort of the real launch, when folks are kind of back from vacation and start to notice some changes, but wanted to ground us just in the purpose and remind us all why DELC was created. So we were created to unify and strengthen our early learning and childcare system. And one of the things that we've really tried to do is create spaces for feedback and continuous improvement. So I'm really excited to share our mission, vision, and values with you all, because this was actually created with childcare provider input, grantee input, community partners, parent input, to help us land on a mission, vision, and values that feel really reflective of what everybody hopes this new department will be. So our mission is that we foster coordinated, culturally appropriate, and family-centered services that recognize and respect the strengths and needs of all children, families, and early learning and care professionals. And our vision is that all children, families, early care and education professionals, and communities are supported and empowered to thrive. We did a lot of work to get these mission and visions down to something clear, concise, and easily understood. And the same goes for our values. So you see here that we have a few really core values that hopefully will be reflected, and you'll see reflected in our work. And that is equity, respect, trust, relationships, safety, continuous improvement, and integrity. And this will all be available on our new website that will come out July 1st as well. And yes, you can go to the next slide. So DELC is a new state agency. Our goal here is to support all children and help families find and pay for high quality early learning and care opportunities. We also support childcare professionals through technical assistance, professional development opportunities, as well as licensing grants and other resources. You can go to the next slide. So hopefully a lot of those pieces feel familiar. We have a few key priorities, and they really fall into kind of three main buckets. The first is that we really are continuing to deliver comprehensive services across the state. And we do that by distributing our funding through things like Preschool Promise, Early Childhood Equity Fund, OPK, as well as the services you all are providing through CCR&Rs, hubs, and 211. We're also continuing to provide services like childcare licensing and compliance. The next big bucket is really supporting and strengthening our workforce. And to do that, we have to make sure that we are responsive and providing accessible customer service, that we're ensuring accessible processes and information. And then our third bucket is continuously improving, which comes back to some of our core values. So this means we have to design and implement accountable systems, improve and increase data collection, evaluation, and ultimately ensure quality assurance across all the services we're providing. And this isn't all going to happen overnight. While the creation of DELC has been 2 years in the making, DELC was created by House Bill 3073 in 2021. Some of you might have actually been in the work group that helped us come up with the agency name. So while July 1st is a major milestone, there's a lot of work that's still going to happen after July 1st. And our hope is that as we continuously improve, you all are being really honest with us about where we're missing the mark, where those opportunities for improvement are, and how we're really partnering to make these systems work better for communities, for families, and for childcare providers. Next slide. So these programs hopefully look familiar to you. So any program that currently resides in the Early Learning Division is going to be a part of the Department of Early Learning and Care. There are a couple of major additions. So the employment-related daycare program, this includes Inclusive Partners, the Teen Parent Program, Foley Apprenticeship Program, and the Head Start contracts are all coming with us in this new Department of Early Learning and Care starting July 1. And we can go to the next slide. So when we think about changes, we've really tried to be realistic about setting expectations, and a lot is going to stay the same on July 1st. Those programs and how we administer them will continue to be administered in the same way under DELC, except for maybe some changes to grants management and to grant agreement timelines. But customer service phone numbers, billing forms, licensing and inspections, the central background registry process, and most importantly, how families apply for and receive ERDC benefits, that will continue to happen through ODHS. So that's a really key message that we want to make sure comes across. But there are some things that are changing. Some of you might have already noticed that we have new email addresses. We're now at delc.oregon.gov. We'll have a new name, a new look. You're getting a little sneak preview of the branding here, and we're going to have a new website as well. All ELD and ERDC staff are moving to DELC. Again, families will still use the same process to apply for benefits, but if you're used to contacting someone in the child care policy team at ODHS, they're now going to be part of the Child Care Assistance Program Office in DELC. And all information related to early learning and childcare are going to be on our new website. So really leaning into that consolidated, centralized, unified place for early learning and childcare. There are some changes to ERDC eligibility that we're going to get into in a little bit. And hopefully you all are aware that we will be switching to a new grants management system. We'll be calling it an awards management system. And this is going to be really key as we think about new funding for the 23-25 biennium. Next slide. Wanted to just very quickly highlight the ERDC changes and what to expect before I hand things over to Elizabeth. So if we go to the next slide, there's a couple of, again, things we want to flag that are staying the same and changing. So again, families will still go to one.oregon.gov or call the One Customer Service Center or use an ODHS field office to apply for ERDC services. We'll continue to use 211 to search for childcare providers, and they'll access childcare facility information on our website, which will be the DELC website. Direct pay unit hours, PO box, phone numbers, OCC numbers, those are staying the same. On July 1st, though, families will be able to receive cash and childcare assistance at the same time. We'll also see 12-month protected eligibility, which means fewer reasons that ERDC cases will close, and families receiving TANF will be able to ask their family coach for ERDC. We'll see more opportunities to engage in the process, more info on ERDC on the DELC website, and some quick tips and resources for families. Next slide. And this is just recognizing that for partners, there are going to be opportunities to connect with ERDC and other DELC staff using existing meetings and structures that we've created under the Early Learning Division. Both ERDC and other DELC staff will continue attending partner meetings, like with self-sufficiency programs, hubs, and CCR&Rs. We'll also still have access to the Oregon Program's eligibility notebook. But you'll see some changes as DELC takes over the employment-related daycare program, and hopefully more opportunities to partner and engage in our rulemaking process and work. You'll see the email changes and partners being asked to rebrand materials, and we'll get into that in a little bit more depth as well. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Elizabeth to talk to you all a little bit more about what is happening with the ERDC program.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to give Ariane a moment. She is going to switch our slide decks over so that you guys have some visuals to go along with what I'm talking about. And then I'll get a little more in depth on the categorical ERDC for TANF families and the 12-month protected eligibility that Alyssa had just mentioned on our last slides. So here we go. Ariane, we can go to the next slide. Okay. So the brief overview is starting July 1st of 2023, so in just about 2 weeks, families are going to be able to receive childcare assistance and cash assistance at the same time. And this is the first time that has happened, so it's a pretty big deal. Previously, families had to pick between which benefit was better for their family, when oftentimes both would be the best way we could serve these families. So families who are already receiving TANF can ask their family coach to get help for paying for their childcare through the ERDC program. And it will provide TANF families with a more flexible type of childcare assistance, so there will no longer be a need for a separate TANF childcare program, and that TANF childcare program is closing. For those of you who might not be familiar with all of our many acronyms, I'm just going to let you know TANF stands for Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, and it is a cash assistance program for families who have dependent children. And then employment-related daycare is what we call ERDC, and that provides childcare assistance. And despite the name, there is not always a requirement to be employed in order to receive ERDC. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this also matters to families who are currently getting ERDC, because they now may be eligible to receive the TANF cash assistance if, for example, they have a job loss, or they are on unpaid leave from work, or they experience a loss of income, or they already met the TANF income requirements, but they chose childcare instead of cash assistance. So families who are currently receiving ERDC are welcome to apply for TANF now if they have any of these situations and they think that it may benefit their family. And then, as Alyssa had mentioned, starting July 1st, there will be a lot less reasons why employment-related daycare cases will close, which is what we call the protected 12-month eligibility. And one of the big parts of that is that families will be eligible for ERDC for their full 12 months, even if they're having trouble connecting to a child care provider. Right now, our ERDC cases close after 3 months if the family has not found a child care provider who takes ERDC that works with their schedule, and then they have to reapply, and it's quite the process. So their ERDC case will remain open for as long as it takes for them to get connected to a provider for that whole 12 months. ERDC benefits will also continue through the 12-month certification. If the caretaker loses their job or they stop attending school, they will not lose out on their childcare. They will remain open. Next slide. There are a lot of different reasons why our families can use their childcare benefits. They can use childcare benefits while they're working. They can use childcare benefits while they're looking for work. They can use childcare benefits if they are a student, and they can use those benefits while they are in class and for study time outside of class. Families can use childcare benefits when they are on medical leave, which includes both maternity and paternity leave. And then both our families receiving the categorical ERDC for TANF families and families on standard ERDC can use some of their childcare hours for family well-being, which can include things like doctor's appointments, school conferences, study time, counseling, and any other activities that really improve the family health and well-being. And family well-being is pretty open, and we listen to our families letting us know what they need and what works for them. So once they have an authorized amount of childcare hours, they can use them for things not simply going to work and traveling to and from work. There's a lot of other opportunities they have. And just a quick caveat here. The only thing that we need to mention is that families will not be able to receive ERDC benefits if the child who needs care doesn't meet certain federal CCDF citizenship requirements. This is in place until hopefully the spring of 2024, when all of our systems will be in place and we will be able to offer ERDC eligibility for all children, regardless of citizenship. Next slide. Okay, so a little more detail about this categorical ERDC for families receiving TANF. As we said, starting on July 1st, families receiving TANF can use ERDC to help pay for childcare. And it is the first time that we have been able to do this. So families currently receiving TANF, their best step is to ask their family coach for ERDC to help pay for their childcare. It won't change their family's TANF benefit. They'll still be able to receive the same amount. And the TANF childcare program will end because ERDC will provide more flexible childcare assistance. We do have families who are currently receiving childcare through our TANF childcare program at ODHS, and they are just automatically being transferred from the TANF childcare program to the new categorical ERDC program with no interruption to their benefits, no reduction of their hours, no increase of their copay, all of that. So they and their providers won't see any interruption in their services on July 1st. Families who currently participate in ERDC can request TANF, like I said, if they had a job loss or on any kind of unpaid leave, and their child care assistance would continue at the same level while they were receiving TANF. And families new to benefits can come to ODHS or use our online applicant portal or call an office and apply for both cash and child care assistance at the same time and have their eligibility determined for both programs simultaneously. It is important to note that families receiving TANF do need to request child care benefits in order to receive this categorical ERDC. It does not just automatically happen when you apply for TANF, so they need to make a note of saying that they need childcare. They can do that while they're applying for TANF or at any time during their TANF certification. And TANF families will automatically be eligible for part-time childcare hours, but they can request up to full-time childcare hours or even more if they have a need for them. And they just have to have that conversation with their ODHS worker who can approve the additional hours. Next slide. And just a couple examples here of how different certification times might work for our families. In this first example, we have somebody who came in and they applied for both TANF and ERDC at the same time in month 1. But in month 7, the caretaker found a job and their TANF eligibility ended. However, their categorical ERDC with the $0 copay will continue through the full 12 months with no changes. So they will be able to maintain that $0 copay and maintain their childcare even after their TANF eligibility has ended. And on the other side of the spectrum, if we had somebody who had been receiving ERDC childcare and they were not eligible for TANF, but then around month 4, they experienced a job loss, they applied for and were found eligible for TANF, we would actually extend their ERDC certification without reducing their ERDC hours, but with giving them a $0 copay, and we would extend that certification an additional 12 months so that it aligned with the 12 months that they were eligible for TANF. Next slide. And then just a little more detail, we talked about this 12-month protected eligibility. So the cases won't close when the family can't find a child care provider. They won't close if the caretaker loses a job or stops attending school. And really the only reasons that we will be closing an ERDC case mid-certification, so before their 12 months of eligibility have ended, is if the family moves out of state, if there are no longer any eligible children in their home, when the family asks us to close their benefits, when benefits were determined in error initially, or if the family reports that their income exceeds the ongoing and exit income limits, which is part of our federal funding requirements. So once the family lets us know they've passed that point, we will close with a timely notice. Those should be the only reasons, though, that our Oregonians should be seeing their ERDC cases close. All right, and then I'm going to pass this one back to Alyssa, and she's going to go over this DELC timeline.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So just to kind of try to round things out, we've been thinking about this work as a really critical first step, but the work isn't done. So DELC will launch on July 1st. We'll continue services and programs with as little as disruption as possible. We're also going to be continuing to provide resources and supports to community partners, to share with families and providers to understand the changes associated with becoming a new agency and the programs moving under DELC. We'll also see ERDC moving over and more families becoming eligible for the ERDC program, as well as the new grants management system that's going to launch for the 23-25 biennium. We'll spend the next year continuously improving. There's a lot of work that wasn't necessary for a July 1 launch, but that we really want to be intentional and thoughtful about to have a strong agency. So policies, processes, and procedures that we can adopt to make it easier to work with the state. As we think about the next year, in 2024, we'll be building off of those lessons learned and improving what DELC offers and how we do the work. That means updating older systems and improving services to providers and families. This will be through data collection and reporting tools. We'll look at building tools to sustain provider and family engagement and start to build this data collection as part of a provider management platform that will be ready in 2025. As we think about kind of closing out the biennium, it really is how we're thinking keeping up and growing DELC. That means we're measuring and reporting on agency performance, looking at those opportunities for improvement, and launching a fully integrated provider management platform that will replace the provider payment function that is currently being provided by the Oregon Department of Human Services. It's a lot of P's, folks. Okay, next slide. So how you can help, we wanted to go over some of the resources that have been distributed and kind of what to expect going forward. So you also should have received a DELC toolkit from us in the last couple of weeks. It included talking points that you could share with families, childcare providers, and other partners, a template email that you could distribute, some FAQs that we've developed if folks have questions about what to expect with this new department, templates for social media posts if you're on social media, a checklist for updating materials, and a visual identity guidelines. And so the visual identity guidelines is something we're really excited about and we know can be a little bit cumbersome. But in that, you'll see our new logo, the typefaces. You might have noticed the fun font we've been using, the new color palette that we'll be using with DELC, as well as sub-brand logos and how to use sub-brand logos. One of our goals with creating the Department of Early Learning and Care and really following through on the legislature's goal to have one unified system is that we want families and providers to see our logo and know that's the place to go if they need help with childcare, early learning, professional development opportunities. And that's really hard to do if we're all using different brands and logos. And so there's guidance in there for those of you who have an established brand as an early learning hub, as 211, as a CCR&R, to co-brand and sub-brand with the DELC logo. All of the early learning division programs becoming DELC programs will use the same logo. We'll have sub-brands with the program name like Preschool Promise, but they'll all be under this adult and child icon that we've created for DELC. And Gabby, thank you, has dropped a link in the chat to that toolkit if folks didn't see it or want to refamiliarize yourself. And we have a link in the slide deck as well that we'll also be distributing, but really encourage folks to dive into that. Let us know if you have questions and start promoting the launch of this new agency on social media. I think one of the things that we're really excited about is this really is the next step in Oregon's evolution to recognizing and supporting early learning and childcare. We've been ahead of the curve in so many places, from the creation of OPK in 1987 to creating the Early Learning Council and then the division, the development of Preschool Promise, the passage of the Student Success Act, and the creation of the Early Learning Account, and the power of having community tell legislators who are focused on K-12 investments that they could not forget about early learning. And it's all leading up to the Department of Early Learning and Care. So we're really excited about it, and we know it's going to take a long time to really change how we do business, but it's such an incredible opportunity to pause and listen and learn. And so you can see here that we're going to also start developing and sharing sub-brand logos. We'll kind of give you a preview that's perfect of that, just so folks can see the different ways this will be incorporated. So if you have your own brand for a non-DELC related program like Hubs, you'll be able to co-brand. And then for all of the Early Learning Division, now DELC funded programs, you'll see that consistent icon program to program. And I'll share too that part of this branding process was talking to families and providers. And we found that even though there have been a lot of materials around Preschool Promise, for example, there wasn't a lot of brand recognition. And so we felt like it was more beneficial to shift everything to this consistent brand, given the lack of brand awareness, than to continue having disparate brands across the agency. So that will be available to folks after July 1st to start incorporating, but really appreciate any amplification you all can offer with this exciting time. And I think, perfect. That is it. I know we've got some questions popping up through the Q&A section. And Gabby, do you want to facilitate those?
Yeah, one that I just answered, but also just want to answer verbally is folks were asking if we were going to share the slide deck, and yes, we will share it after the webinar. I also just saw something. I will work on getting a live link that works for you all, just to quickly get those two questions out of the way. Thank you for letting me know that that wasn't popping up. First question, Alyssa, is the language of customer service replacing technical assistance?
That's a great question. Yes and no. So I would say we think about customer service. One of the new and exciting functions about DELC that we haven't really touched on is we do now have our own procurement shop, HR shop, accounting shop. That's why we get our own grants management system. So when we talk about customer service, we're thinking about what it's like to interact with the Department of Early Learning and Care and what services you're receiving from us. Technical assistance will continue to be the language when we're thinking about helping childcare providers through the licensing process, through one-off kind of situations and questions when it comes to complying with grant requirements. And customer service is really going to be if you have a concern or you have a need, we'll be able to be more responsive and consistent. One of the things that we're looking at going forward is really leveraging this opportunity to build off of the customer service that the direct pay unit offers, as well as the customer service that the Office of Child Care offers. And so down the road, is there a way to really streamline that so that there's no wrong door and we can more easily be responsive to the variety of needs of providers when we know that our childcare providers might have both a licensing question and a subsidy question.
Thanks, Alyssa. And then there was a couple questions regarding ERDC. Will the name change to employment-related childcare to align with other language moving away from daycare?
That's a great question. So ERDC is the name in statute, but our goal down the road is to shift the name of the program to be more reflective and move away from that daycare term. Also, we've seen some major policy changes to the program. So now you can be a full-time student, for example, in order to access services. With our TANF families being able to access ERDC, even the employment related part isn't really applicable anymore. So that is something that we'll aim to do in the coming years through the legislative process. We are shifting to calling the team that staffs this program the Child Care Assistance Program Office, which aligns with what a lot of other states call their child care subsidy program.
Thank you. And then will there be an update on the orientation DHS Part 2 training?
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yes, there will be the updates to all of the slide decks that they use to run those orientations are in the works, and they're all being refitted with all of the new language and the correct agencies and contact information so that they will start offering those with all of the correct information for you guys.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And then are all providers who are TANF approved also ERDC approved?
Also, yes. Right now we call them like DHS approved providers. So you can't be approved for just TANF childcare or just employment related daycare. If you're approved, you can take either. In the future, we will be calling them ERDC providers. Since all of our licensed providers will be going through DELC, we wanted to make it really clear that those who are listed to approve or to provide care and receive subsidy through the ERDC program will be referred to as ERDC providers going forward.
Thank you. And then why is ERDC still not available for children that don't have citizenship?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. And Elizabeth, feel free to jump in. That is in the works. So one of the things that House Bill 3073 required was that non-citizen children have access to the ERDC program. And we're in the process of working with ODHS to make those changes in the one system, as well as the several legacy systems behind it that support the program. So that will happen in spring of 24. So we've got a little bit of a gap between TANF families coming onto ERDC and that policy being available across programs. But that is the plan, and we are moving forward with that IT systems process to do that in spring of 24. Elizabeth, anything else there?
No, Alyssa's reasoning, it's really all system and how much we can get done at one time, but I do just want to make sure it's clear to everybody, although ERDC is not currently available for non-citizen children, the citizenship of the parents, it does not matter at all. So non-citizen parents can request and receive childcare benefits for their citizen children or children who meet the citizenship requirements. There are a few.
Thanks. That's really important clarification, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And then for marketing materials that folks already have out with the old preschool promise logo, will those all need to be replaced?
Great question. We know that you all are doing a lot of recruitment as we prepare for the fall program year. The goal is not to take all those beautiful posters and replace them this summer. We just ask that as you're developing materials going forward, you work to start making that shift. And so if it doesn't happen this program year, that is totally okay. And you can start planning for that going forward.
Awesome. Are all early learning hubs have to be sub-brands? They're not listed on this program sub-brand.
Yes, early learning hubs will have to sub-brand as well. So we know that many hubs have, in the last 10 years, created their own branding for recognition within community. So we'll be providing resources to support hubs to prepare to sub-brand. So it won't be replacing your hub logo, but making sure that we're demonstrating that hub logo alongside the Department of Early Learning and Care going forward.
Does the toolkit have a branding guide?
Yes, there's a branding guide in the toolkit. This will include what fonts to use, when to use those fonts, the logo information. And as you go through that toolkit, if there's additional guidance that would be helpful, please let us know if you, and Don, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but delc.info@delc.oregon.gov. You can send your feedback to us that way, and we'd be happy to work on developing additional resources after the agency launches.
And then will the changes to ERDC include eligibility to families that are not income eligible for TANF, but are for SNAP, and not all of the adults in the household are working or going to school?
Can take that. So no, we will have two, we call interagency, so among us, we're referring to it as standard ERDC and then the categorical ERDC. Standard ERDC will not have the same changes that categorical ERDC will have. So there will still be a requirement for the caretakers to either be attending school or working or have a valid medical reason why they are not able to do either of those in order to receive the standard ERDC. Once they are approved and they have those hours because they're in school or they're working, then they will be able to use their childcare hours for family well-being activities, but they have to have either the qualifying work or school activity for both caretakers in the household before they can receive standard ERDC.
Great. And then what do you think will be the biggest impact on childcare providers with the launch of DELC? Will the dissolution of TANF have any impact on providers?
Yeah, I'll start and then Elizabeth would love for you to jump in. So I think there's a few impacts we're hoping for. Hopefully, it's just easier to go to one place for information when you're talking about access to subsidized care, because we know that families who are eligible for ERDC are also eligible for OPK, for relief nurseries, for preschool promise. And so we want to make sure that families are aware of the suite of services that they could qualify for and are able to select the program that best meets their needs or the combination of services that best meet their needs. And having us all sit in one place is a really important step to making that easier and more accessible, both for providers and for families. I think the other goal is that we're able to, and this again will take a little bit of time, create more consistency. We've heard from our grantees that, we ask things just differently enough between preschool promise and OPK that folks have to do a lot of similar but different work. So one of our other goals is creating more consistency between programs where we can, and having a more streamlined approach through things like our data collection system that we'll be creating, eventually our provider management platform, so that it really can feel like a more cohesive system. And then I think I would just offer on the TANF side, just to be very clear too, we're talking about the TANF childcare program. So TANF will still remain. We are just moving families who've been receiving TANF childcare to ERDC. And I'll say one of our really big hopes is that because of the improvements we've made to ERDC, more eligible TANF families will want to access ERDC because you're going to have a standard floor of 20 or 40 hours a week. We have protected 12-month eligibility. You're not going to have to bounce back and forth between ERDC and TANF if you lose your job. So we hope this will just make it easier as families get more familiar with the changes. And then Elizabeth, loved for you to add to that.
I was just going to add on to that. So there will be some changes with the dissolution of the TANF childcare program, but like Alyssa was saying, we expect them to be positive because TANF childcare is a lot more tenuous. It's really a month-to-month agreement. And so sometimes providers who accept a child on TANF childcare may not know until partway through the next month that they're not going to get their childcare benefits paid through the TANF program. And so switching them over to categorical ERDC not only guarantees them that minimum part-time 108 hours a month for both the provider and the family, but it guarantees them 12 months of eligibility. And it gives them a stability for the providers and the families. That's really an improvement over what we were seeing through the TANF childcare program.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And then bear with me, it's kind of like a two-parter so that I could combine these. Are there any discussions about change to the ERDC rates to continue valuing the providers? And will there be an increase in the income eligibility for ERDC on July 1?
So ERDC rates are set through the collective bargaining process with AFSCME, who represents the home-based providers, and SEIU representing the regulated subsidy providers. We're currently in the collective bargaining process right now to determine what those rates will be. And then once we know what the rates will be, whether we have the budget to absorb those rate increases or whether we'd have to reduce caseload. In terms of income eligibility, at this time, we do not have plans in place to increase the income eligibility for ERDC or any of our other programs. But that is something that in the future we'd be able to do through the legislative process. And as we think about creating that consistency program to program, we may see changes going forward. But right now we're focusing on implementing the eligibility requirements of House Bill 3073, and particularly the TANF categorical eligibility and the protected 12-month eligibility on July 1st.
Great. Since branding for all programs will be one cohesive look, will Preschool Promise CE staff have to wait for new applications or documents to be provided, or are they allowed to move forward with the documents they currently have supplied by ELD/DELC for the 23-25
Great question. Yeah, go forward. You might start to see additional documentation that has the new logo and information, but we do not want to slow any work down. And again, we know that you all are out there recruiting families, getting them connected to providers in anticipation for the program year in the fall. We do not want to delay that by any means. So we'll make these resources available to you, and we'll also make sure that there's any assistance we can provide as you start to make that shift down the road. And that's a great place too, where we'd love to hear your thoughts on additional resources that might be helpful to just help your community go through that change if they are more familiar with the Preschool Promise branding and logo, and understanding that the services aren't changing even if the color scheme and photos are.
Great. Will Inclusive Partners continue to provide trainings to programs when requested, and will there be a referral process to get their support?
Elizabeth, do you want to take that one?
As far as I know, Inclusive Partners will continue to provide all of the trainings when requested, because that's something that they're doing. And Inclusive Partners actually moved from ODHS over to ELD earlier this year. So they have been operating kind of as the pre-DELC for a while now. As far as the referral process through ODHS, though, that will remain the same if a parent is requesting the high needs, and they can ask their ODHS worker to send the referral over. Alternatively, they can talk directly to who they are working for with Inclusive Partners, and Inclusive Partners can still reach out to our child care assistance team, who will connect with ODHS and make sure that that referral is in place. We have some systems set up to do that right now, and those will continue as they currently are working.
Great. Should CCRNRs also be sub-branding?
Yes, if you have your own CCRNR logo, we'll be giving you guidance on sub-branding there as well.
Okay. There was a comment that OCCD was not listed. Are they also going to be sub-branding?
So the Inclusive Partners program has already sort of separated from OCCD and is fully getting absorbed in the DELC logos and branding. So you'll start to see those changes with the Inclusive Partners program, but we're not changing the overarching OCCD structure that's within the Department of Human Services.
And then regarding hubs, there's a question about potentially needing a bigger conversation about branding for the hubs. Communities already get confused about what CCRNR does, what hubs do, and adding the DELC branding adds more confusion. And for the early learning hubs that are aligned with OPEC and parent ed hubs, it seems to be adding more confusion for families.
Yes, happy to provide more strategic thinking and partnership, and where there's opportunities to think about creating one cohesive and accessible system for families in community that doesn't need to be delineated by the different infrastructure kind of backbone organizations. So happy to partner with the best way to roll that out as we're taking on co-branding and making sure that we are creating one agency that's responsive to community need and accessible across the board.
Perfect. And then just a quick comment about OCCD and ORO not being affiliated with the Inclusive Childcare Program.
Yeah, so we're not changing anything related. Sorry, I was thinking about the council that's over Inclusive Partners. We're not changing the branding right now for ORO or OCCD. Those are not operated by us. And while we provide funding, they're considered sort of external functions at this time.
Great. And then just a quick plug, we will be hosting a branding webinar at the end of July for folks. So please keep an eye out for that invitation, just kind of letting you all know once we get closer to that date, we'll be happy to provide more information. And then is there a precedent for any other state agencies to have subcontractors co-brand?
We did some initial research in the development of our agency brand, as we are the primary funders of the early learning hubs, the relief nursery programs, not the relief nursery programs, OPK and Preschool Promise. These are really state-funded programs that may benefit from other funding opportunities as well. And there was value we found in looking at other states like Georgia, looking at states like Colorado, and making sure that when there is an agency dedicated to early learning and care, that there's that connection made to the programs and services available in community.
Perfect. Thanks, Alyssa. Do we know when ODHS will have the orientation part 2 slides ready?
I don't have an exact date. I would say sometime hopefully within the next 2 weeks. I have seen them and edits to them, so I know that they're currently in the works.
Perfect, thank you. And then, do we have a simple way to explain the difference between DHS listed and licensed childcare now that agencies will be DELC?
So I had mentioned we are going to start referring to them as ERDC listed. And the big difference is somebody who is licensed can be listed to receive ERDC, and so can our license exempt providers can also choose to be listed to receive ERDC. So it's really just important to clarify that not all licensed providers are listed, not all listed providers are licensed, but you do need to do the additional step and become listed to receive ERDC subsidy payments if you are interested in receiving payments and taking kids who utilize the ERDC program. And that process won't change. So the listing form, I did see there was one on here about it needing updated, which is something we'll be working on updating the language on it, but you can still download a listing form. You'll be able to do it from the DELC website, from the ODHS forms server. You can walk into any ODHS office and ask for a listing form. You'll still be able to mail them back to DPU because their PO box won't change. So even if it's an older listing form that hasn't been updated, it will still work. And you can turn in listing forms to the ODHS offices who will be happy to fax them directly to DPU for you. So that whole process will stay the same.
Thanks, Elizabeth. With the alignment of services to be more streamlined for families, will there be a statewide coordinated enrollment process in the future?
At this time, we're not making any major changes to the coordinated enrollment process, but we're working with the Hub Association and the Head Start Association post July 1 on convening a work group focused on coordinated enrollment and opportunities for improvement. So there may be some recommendations in the future, but this alignment that we're working to create as an agency will not require that we're shifting coordinated enrollment to a statewide process.
Thanks, Alyssa. And then these next few questions are all essentially DELC related. Are phone numbers staying the same? Are there any physical addresses changing?
Yes, phone numbers are staying the same. As we went through our migration change, emails have shifted. We've got new phones, but numbers largely have not changed. We also are generally not moving. We still have our main office in the Veterans Affairs building. The staff that are in the direct pay unit and that were in the childcare policy team at ODHS, those will now be at our main office in Salem in the Department of Veterans Affairs on the 3rd floor. But our licensing field offices are remaining the same aside from one change in Portland that's unrelated. So it's a mixed bag, but the creation of DELC does not mean we're all physically moving to a new space.
Perfect. And then when we talk about ELD or OCC going forward after this webinar, are we to call everything DELC or should we wait until July 1st to start using this name?
It's a great question. I would say the way we've been thinking about it is, are we communicating a change or information that's sort of future facing, or is it in the immediate? So over the next, 10 days, if you're talking about something right now, you can stick with ELD or OCC. Going forward, you can shift. On the OCC front, there's a little bit of trickiness happening. There is legislation that is pending that would replace OCC with DELC in statute. If that bill doesn't pass, then OCC will still kind of have its own standalone identity until we're able to make that change. So we'll have more information available for you going forward on that front.
Thanks, Alyssa. And then with the creation of DELC, as you mentioned, we will now have our own procurement shop. How do you anticipate this impacting contract timelines?
Positively. We have a really incredible procurement director and an amazing procurement team. They've all been prepping grant agreements. We're shifting towards 2-year grant agreements in most cases for preschool promise. OPK, there is a statutory requirement that they have to be annual. So we're waiting on legislation to see if it passes to remove that requirement. But we anticipate that having a dedicated procurement shop will allow us to create processes that are a lot more responsive to the needs of our grantees than a procurement shop that was created to be responsive to the needs of school districts and education service districts. So we're hopeful that folks will see and notice an improvement in terms of turnaround times, procurement processes when there are new dollars to request access to funding, and that you're able to also see more consistency between grants, again, as we work towards streamlining and creating consistent expectations between programs.
Great. And so Alyssa, would it be best to list all three names, ELD, OCC, and DELC until things get sorted?
April K, I hate to make you do that. That seems like a lot. It wouldn't hurt to go ahead and name them all. I think we know this is going to be an organic process that takes time. So if you refer to ELD and it's a document that comes out July 5th, that's totally okay. It's going to take folks a little bit of time to shift to referencing the Department of Early Learning and Care.
Thanks. And then there was a comment about the listing and licensing issue that rests more with parents not necessarily knowing the difference between listed and licensed care providers, and how listed providers often claim certified status instead of listing status on social media, which ends up misleading parents.
And that's a great point, Heather. And one of our goals on our new website, which will be launching on July 1st, is to create more accessible information about the types of care. And I think this is another area that will not be fully resolved on July 1st by any means, but really gives us an opportunity to create more responsive messaging going forward. As we're taking over the ERDC program, we also know there's a lot of work that needs to be done to increase the number of providers accepting ERDC. We know a lot of providers aren't aware of all the changes that have been made to the program that really make it easier to use and access. And so as we are doing that, we'll want to work really closely with you all on where you think that confusion lies, how we can be clear in providing more resources to providers. And we know it'll take a little bit more time, but we want to make sure that we really are being responsive to the needs of families. And I think that's where we have the most opportunity. We know that as a state agency, we're not usually going to be the best messenger to reach families directly, but we want to make sure that we're keeping a strong family lens in the work that we do, so that we're developing resources and materials that you and other community partners can use to make sure families are aware of the programs and services that they can access.
Thanks, Alyssa. And then just a quick comment regarding the DHS listing form, and that it probably would be good to update it because it doesn't list the FFL training as a required training.
I do see that. And we will be working on updating all of the forms that are associated with ERDC. We'll be updating the provider guide, the listing form. And one of the things, like Alyssa had mentioned with procurement, is this will actually be a positive change, because when we want to make these updates through ODHS, which is like a 10,000 person multifaceted agency, it takes a long time for our smaller requests to make it through that process. And as we move that program into DELC, we'll have a little bit more control over the timelines and be able to make updates like those in a more timely fashion.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And there were several questions or comments about the toolkit, and many of you not necessarily being able to copy and paste it. I'm hoping that gets solved. I'm going to redrop it in there, but basically once you copy and paste it into your browser, it will automatically download that toolkit for you. So it won't necessarily take you to a new web page, but it will download the document for you. And then our branding guide will be on our password protected website after July 1 for you all as well. A couple comments. The enhanced rate application also needs to be updated. And self-sufficiency staff often tell parents that they need to find a licensed or certified provider, which adds to the confusion.
I did make a note of that one. We have monthly analyst hours where our childcare policy team goes over information about ERDC with the self-sufficiency workers. So that can be a topic that we add in soon and just kind of re-bring that up. Again, that's a pretty large agency, so new workers cycle through quite a bit, and that information needs to be shared. Some of them might be confused about the difference between a licensed and listed provider. So we'll try to get that shared more widely.
And we'll have continued opportunities, after July 1st. Again, it's really a major, major milestone, but it's not the end. And so we want to make sure we're creating plenty of spaces and opportunities for you all to surface where there's confusion, opportunities for us to be clearer or provide, again, more resources and supports so that you all can do the important work you're doing. And we can make sure that the families who need access to services are getting what they need. So we really appreciate that level of feedback, and we'll make sure there's continued opportunities to share that.
That was the last of the questions. I did just drop it in the chat again, the link to the toolkit, but just a quick reminder that the link is also linked in the slide deck that we will be sharing with you all. So if any of you are still having issues actually copying the link from the chat, it will be in the slide deck that we share with you all as well. So, and then one final question, are the materials about the transition available in languages other than English?
Yes, we have a 2-pager that's being developed to really capture what to expect now that DELC is launching, and that will be available in the next week or so.
There's also a 1-page kind of a flyer about the basic ERDC eligibility changes that is available on both the ERDC and ODHS websites in 5 languages.
Great. Thank you so much. Any closing thoughts, Alyssa, before we sign off?
Just thank you all for the time. We'll get these resources to you all, as well as the inbox you can email, because again, if there are additional resources we could be developing, please let us know. We want to make sure we're giving you everything we can so that you're successful, and just appreciate you all carving out the time with not a lot of notice. We're really excited to do this work with you. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thank you.